Since 2007, the United States Africa Command, or more commonly known as AFRICOM, has been knee-deep in the so-called war on terror operations against al-Shabaab and al-Qaeda, supposedly al-Qaeda-linked group operating in Somalia. These war on terror operations have included everything from airstrikes to drone strikes and even boots-on-the-ground special forces operations. And surprisingly, you're going to love this, according to AFRICOM statistics, in all of that time, only four Somali civilians have been killed in all of those operations. Yes, four is apparently 2007 to today. The Pentagon, yes, they would have us believe that in 13 years of war on terror operations, just 4 civilians have been killed in Somalia as a result. The Daily Beast reports that the difference between the number of civilian casualties declared by AFRICOM compared to those recorded by organizations like Amnesty International and Air Wars is so vast that it has prompted members of Congress to write directly to the American general in charge, with Somali-born U.S. Representative Ilhan Omar leading the charge in this letter-writing campaign. But many feel that simply writing a letter is not nearly enough to rein in AFRICOM's dangerous operations in the region. One of those is Tunde Osazua, who is on the African team of the Black Alliance for Peace and is a coordinator for BAP's U.S. Out of Africa network. He joins us now to discuss AFRICOM's operations in Somalia and his issues with Representative Omar's response to the Pentagon's moves in the region. Thank you for joining us, Tunde.
Thank you for having me.
First, just what have been, let's get this out the way first. What do we know have been the casualty rates from U.S. operations in Somalia since 2007, and what has been the effect of AFRICOM's presence in that country in the region?
Yeah, so AFRICOM is essentially the colonization of Africa by the U.S., and it constitutes the new scramble for Africa, which is pretty similar to what the European powers or colonial powers fought over in the 1800s. So what I guess Air Wars and Amnesty International reported were that since 2007, there have been between 71 and 139 civilians killed. Those are Air Wars numbers. And then Amnesty International says that there have been 21 civilians killed since 2018. So, and that's only what they've been able to track. There could have been many more. What we've seen is that AFRICOM likes to paint civilians as enemy combatants, so those numbers are likely understated. But yeah, we find that the effect of AFRICOM on the continent has really just been to facilitate the more efficient free flow of natural resources from the continent of Africa to the global market. And it's had devastating effects on the political structures of countries like Somalia and Benin and many other countries. AFRICOM has bases all over the continent. So we see it as imperative that there's a mass movement to remove AFRICOM from the continent and for the U.S. to completely leave.
Yeah, I couldn't accept that there would only be 4 casualties since 2007. It's not really how the U.S. operates, right, Amisha?
Absolutely. And so Representative Omar, along with Adam Schiff and 5 other House Democrats, sent a letter to AFRICOM General Stephen Townsend that basically demands that AFRICOM clarify how it investigates civilian casualty allegations. And according to the Daily Beast, reminds AFRICOM that providing clarity about the reasons for discrepancies and defining who the military considers a combatant is required by recent legislation. And while this seems like a good oversight on their part, many, including yourself, are pointing out some underlying problems with this attempt at AFRICOM accountability. What are those problems?
Yeah, so that's a good question. We see this letter as an attempt to legitimize AFRICOM and to provide it some sort of political and moral cover. The demand for better accountability and transparency by the U.S. Africa Command is tantamount to asking colonizers to do better public documenting of their colonizing. And we don't see that as the right approach at all. We think that the only legitimate demand is for the U.S. to leave Africa and for AFRICOM to be shut down. And yeah, I think it really just paints AFRICOM as like a benevolent organization, which is clearly not. I think that has to be the focus. We have to work towards the dismantling and rather the demilitarization of the African continent, and that should be the focus.
I couldn't agree with you more. It's really interesting how we just kind of accept nowadays that like the U.S. military is just going to be involved no matter what corner of the world we're in. You know, I mean, it's kind of sad to see that that's just okay. You know, one of the interesting things you point out in a recent article that you wrote about on this issue is that Al-Shabaab, while certainly not been a joyous addition to the region, the United States and its military operations there have actually done more damage than that terrorist group. How has the U.S. contributed to the issues that are affecting Somalia today through AFRICOM's actions?
That's a good question. Essentially, Al-Shabaab is the product of U.S. destabilization. They were formed in 2007, and their presence in Somalia and throughout the continent has been elevated by U.S. Essentially, during the U.S. Occupation of Somalia, they really weakened the government and made it harder for them to centralize power and to fight against forces like Al-Shabaab. And Al-Shabaab, a lot of the radicalization that took place and encouraged people to join that organization was driven by just U.S. activity in the region. So we really see Al-Shabaab as providing cover for U.S. presence in the region. And I don't think it's really the intention of U.S. forces of AFRICOM to completely remove Al-Shabaab. We see them as working, using Al-Shabaab's presence to further facilitate that flow of natural resources and promoting U.S. interest in the region.
It's that old excuse that like, well, hey, if there's a danger and if there's a threat there, then you need us to be there. If there's no danger and threat, well, then, everyone looks around and says, well, why are you still here, U.S.? I think that's a really great point that you bring up right there. And I want to say, thank you very much for the good work that you're doing and getting these messages out there and really looking at this kind of the geopolitics taking place in Africa from a place of peace as opposed and solidarity and trying to lift African nations up as opposed to what can we get out of it. We don't see enough of that today. Thank you so much for joining us today, Tunde.